Karen didn't just walk into Judge Judy's courtroom. She stormed in like it was her personal battlefield. Clutching a thick binder of self-printed legal documents and muttering to herself about defamation and bias, she declared before the hearing even began that she was fully prepared to sue Judge Judy herself if the ruling didn't go her way. The audience gasped, the bailiff froze, and Judy? She didn't even blink. Karen, with the arrogance of someone who'd watched too many courtroom dramas, announced she would own this show by the end of the day. What she didn't know was that Judge Judy had already reviewed every shred of her so-called evidence, and what she found inside it could not only destroy Karen's case, but cost her $500,000 in penalties before she even realized what trap she'd triggered. Karen thought she was about to humiliate a legend on her own stage, but in truth, she was walking straight into a legal ambush meticulously set by the very woman she thought she could overpower. Before we reveal how this courtroom erupted and turned Karen's threat into a life-changing disaster, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the shocking moments that redefine what justice really looks like. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it. This wasn't going to be an ordinary case. It wasn't even about the petty civil dispute that had originally brought Karen here. That had vanished the moment she slammed her binder down on the plaintiff's table and announced, with her chin lifted high, that she was prepared to sue Judge Judy personally if she didn't like the ruling. It was a line few people would dare to speak out loud, and for good reason. In that single sentence, Karen hadn't just threatened a television icon, she had just challenged the legal authority of one of the most feared and respected judges in modern American courtroom history. The stakes were no longer about a refund, a complaint, or some perceived slight. They had transformed into something much larger, much riskier. Karen had made this personal, and personal battles in Judge Judy's courtroom are not battles you walk away from unharmed. The viewers watching from their couches couldn't fully grasp the weight of what had just been set in motion. But the producers, the legal team behind the scenes, and Judy herself understood it instantly. Threatening to sue a sitting judge, especially on record in a televised courtroom, was not just reckless. It opened a legal minefield that Karen clearly didn't comprehend. If Judy chose, she could refer Karen for contempt, obstruction, or even perjury, depending on what Karen's evidence contained. And if those documents contained false statements or forged materials, the penalties wouldn't be symbolic. They would be real, enforceable, and devastating. In other words, Karen had raised the stakes from win or lose to win or pay the price of your arrogance in 6 figures. Karen didn't see it that way. To her, this was theater. She had prepared dramatic lines and even practiced them in front of her bathroom mirror, convinced the audience would see her as brave, as someone standing up to corruption. She didn't realize that the courtroom wasn't a stage, and Judge Judy wasn't an actress playing the role of a judge. She was a real judge with real legal authority, and she didn't need applause. She had rulings. This wasn't a debate club or a social media comment section. This was a venue where evidence either stands or collapses, and where the cost of being wrong is measured not in embarrassment, but in money, credibility, and permanent legal consequences. And Judy knew it. That's why she hadn't reacted when Karen made her threat. That silence, that infuriating stillness wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Judy had been on the bench for decades. She'd seen scam artists, fraudsters, fake lawyers, and arrogant amateurs walk into her courtroom believing they could bluff their way through. Some came with tears, others with theatrics, but they all left the same way, humbled, humiliated, and often broke. Judy had once fined a plaintiff into bankruptcy for trying to submit falsified bank statements. She had dismantled self-proclaimed legal experts who couldn't even define the terms they were throwing around. What Karen didn't realize was that Judy thrived on opponents who underestimated her. They gave her something rarer than gold, a clean opportunity to show the difference between bluster and actual law. Behind the bench, Judy's mind was already 3 steps ahead. If Karen's documents contained even one forged element, she could recommend sanctions. If they contained slanderous accusations against court personnel, Judy could push for defamation penalties. And if Karen truly had no legal grounds to threaten a judge, her statement could be interpreted as contempt, which carries financial penalties that climb rapidly depending on severity. And because the entire exchange was being filmed, broadcast, and archived, every word Karen had spoken could become legally admissible evidence. Karen thought she was making good television, Judy knew she had just made a self-incriminating statement on camera. The gallery in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably, picking up on the tension they couldn't name. They could feel that something invisible had changed. Like the air before a thunderstorm, Karen continued to posture, flipping dramatically through her binder, whispering to her friend that this judge won't know what hit her. The irony was almost painful. Judy knew exactly what had hit her. An arrogant amateur who had just detonated her own credibility before the case had even begun. And Judy, who had built her entire career on precision, was not about to let that opportunity go to waste. What Karen didn't understand, and what made the stakes so dangerously high, was how Judge Judy operated when cornered. Most people, when threatened, become defensive. They flinch, they explain, they retreat. Judy does the opposite. Threats sharpen her. They focus her. They turn her from a mildly impatient television personality into the merciless, steel-spined jurist who rose through the Bronx family court system, handling the most vicious, chaotic, and legally complex cases in the city. In those courts, emotion didn't win cases. Evidence did. Judy had spent decades dismantling pathological liars, narcissists, manipulators, and con artists who believed their charisma would protect them from consequences. None of them ever won, and Karen was about to discover she wasn't the exception. She was the rule, and the rule is that arrogance is always more expensive than it looks. Even the network's legal advisor, watching from the control room, leaned forward and muttered, "She just crossed the line." Because here was the unspoken reality. Threatening to sue a judge isn't just a dramatic moment. It's a legal grenade. If Karen followed through, she would have to prove Judge Judy had acted maliciously, outside the scope of her judicial role, and caused her actual damages. That is an impossible burden of proof, one that seasoned attorneys rarely attempt. Failing to meet that burden wouldn't just mean losing. It would mean owing legal costs to the very person she tried to sue. Those costs could reach into the hundreds of thousands depending on how much court time was wasted. Karen didn't realize it yet, but her offhand threat had just triggered the machinery of real law, and that machinery doesn't stop for feelings. It only stops for facts, and facts were Judy's specialty. That was why her silence was so terrifying. While Karen paraded her outrage, Judy was quietly doing what she always did, dissecting. Every page Karen held, every statement she blurted, every statistic she misquoted, Judy was mentally cataloging it like evidence in a trial. She was looking for the cracks, and with every second Karen spoke, those cracks widened. Judy didn't need to interrupt her. She needed her to keep talking because every word was tightening the rope around her own case. Judy's stillness was the stillness of a predator waiting for the exact moment to strike, not out of anger, but out of certainty. And when that moment came, Judy wouldn't raise her voice. She would raise the stakes. For Karen, the cost of failure wasn't just theoretical anymore. It was financial, reputational, and possibly legal. If Judy ruled against her and referred her for sanctions, Karen could be ordered to pay the opposing party's legal fees, damages for defamation, penalties for contempt, and restitution for wasting the court's time. The number being whispered among the producers wasn't small. It wasn't 10,000 or even 50,000. It was $500,000. That was the estimated total exposure if Judy invoked every possible penalty available under civil procedure for fraud, contempt, and malicious prosecution. Karen thought she was making history. She was, but not the way she imagined. She wasn't going to be remembered as the woman who stood up to Judge Judy. She was about to be remembered as the woman who gambled her future to win an argument and lost everything instead. And the beauty of it, from Judy's perspective, was that Karen had done this to herself. Judy didn't chase her into this corner. Karen had marched there proudly, binder in hand, with a smirk that was already starting to fade under the weight of her own words. This was the essence of the stakes, the fact that Judy didn't have to destroy her. Karen had volunteered for destruction. She had declared war on someone who had been winning battles in courtrooms since before Karen was even born. And when you go to war with someone like that, you don't just risk losing. You risk being turned into a cautionary tale told to law students for the next 20 years. Even the audience could feel it now. They were no longer watching a case. They were watching a countdown. Every word Karen spoke, every exaggerated gesture she made, felt like one more tick closer to detonation. People shifted in their seats, holding their breath, waiting for Judy to finally speak. Because everyone knew that when she did, it wouldn't be loud. It would be lethal. And the instant Judy opened her mouth, the real trial would begin. The trial of Karen's arrogance against Judy's preparation. And only one of those things has ever survived in this courtroom. That was the true weight pressing down on the room like a storm front. Not the fear that Karen might win, but the certainty that she couldn't, and that when she lost, it would not be quiet. It would be catastrophic. This was no longer a small claims hearing. This was a high-wire act over a legal abyss, and Karen had stepped onto it blindfolded, convinced she could fly. Everyone else could see the fall coming. Only she couldn't. And when she hit the bottom, it wouldn't just break her pride. It would break her bank. The hearing officially began, though it felt less like the start of a case and more like the ignition of a storm. Karen lunged into her opening statement before Judy could even fully address the courtroom, her voice shrill and vibrating with defiance. She declared in front of the entire gallery that she had every legal right to question Judge Judy's impartiality, and that she had assembled irrefutable proof that this courtroom had conspired against her. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the giddy energy of someone convinced she was about to make television history. She held her binder aloft as though it were a sacred text, pages spilling out like feathers from a ruptured pillow, her eyes darting from the bailiff to the cameras, scanning for the validation she assumed would arrive in thunderous applause. It didn't. The only sound was the soft scratch of Judy's pen on paper. Karen didn't notice that. She mistook the silence for weakness. She believed Judy's stillness meant confusion, that the lack of reaction meant her words were landing like blows. It was the oldest mistake in Judy's courtroom, to interpret quiet as retreat. Because Judy wasn't retreating. She was measuring. She was calibrating. She was doing what only seasoned judges can do. Watching not just the words but the structure beneath them, the cracks between them, the way each one undercut the last. Karen kept piling accusations higher, unaware that she was building not a fortress but a tower of kindling. And Judy was sitting silently with the match. The chaos only deepened. Karen launched into what she called her legal evidence presentation, though it looked more like a paper explosion. She scattered receipts across the table, most of them irrelevant, several half-faded. She misquoted statutes she'd copied from a blog, fumbling the numbers and omitting the sections that contradicted her claims. She accused producers of bias, hinted at fraud, and even suggested the bailiff had colluded against her. The words tumbled from her mouth like rocks breaking loose from a cliff, messy and unstoppable, until they crashed into a frantic crescendo that left even her own witness staring down at the floor in embarrassment. And still Judy said nothing. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched, occasionally jotting a single note as if cataloging evidence at a crime scene. For the viewers watching at home, it might have seemed like Judy was being steamrolled. For anyone who knew her, it was the opposite. This was her weapon. This was how she dismantled people who thought volume equaled victory. She let them speak. Because every word they spoke without control became another brick in the wall they were building around themselves. Judy had learned long ago that arrogance, when uninterrupted, becomes self-incrimination. And Karen was incriminating herself with such reckless enthusiasm that even the producers in the control booth were exchanging uneasy glances. They knew that if Judy decided to engage, she wouldn't just win, she would incinerate her. The courtroom air grew heavy, like the charged stillness before lightning strikes. Karen, sweating now, mistook the wait for triumph. She thought she was winning. Judy knew she was collapsing. The only question left was when to speak, and when she did, it would not be to argue. It would be to end her. The moment came without warning, quiet and surgical. Karen had just finished accusing the courtroom of systemic corruption when Judy finally looked up from her notes. The shift was so subtle most people didn't register it at first, but Karen did. That single piercing glance cut through her rambling like a blade through paper. Judy set her pen down gently, folded her hands, and spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. "Ms. Karen," she said evenly, her voice like cold steel wrapped in velvet, "please define for this court the legal term judicial bias, which you've used 12 times so far." Karen blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "It means when a judge is unfair," she stammered. "Incorrect," Judy replied instantly, not even blinking. "Judicial bias has a specific legal definition. You are accusing me of a disqualifying conflict of interest. So please provide evidence of one, not feelings. Not conspiracy theories, evidence. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen fumbled through her binder, pulling out random papers. Judy didn't even look at them. And while you're searching, Judy continued calmly, be aware that filing a false claim of judicial misconduct carries a penalty of up to $500,000. The color drained from Karen's face. The gallery collectively inhaled. Judy had not raised her voice. She didn't need to. With a single sentence, she had flipped the entire courtroom on its axis. Karen had been the hunter. Now she was prey, and she knew it. Judy leaned forward ever so slightly, her gaze steady and merciless. Let's begin, she said, and the tone in her voice was no longer velvet, only steel. She picked up the first page Karen had thrown down earlier, holding it between two fingers as though it were something contaminated. You claim this is proof that the bailiff conspired against you. It's a grocery receipt. The courtroom chuckled nervously. Judy didn't smile. It's also dated 8 months before this case was even filed. She set it aside like irrelevant debris. Karen sputtered, That's not the one. But Judy had already moved on. She lifted another paper. Here, you've cited Statute 14B Section 3 as grounds for suing a sitting judge. Fascinating, because no such statute exists. You fabricated law. The word fabricated hit like a hammer. Karen's jaw slackened, her face draining pale, but Judy wasn't finished. She tapped her gavel once, softly. These so-called affidavits are unsigned. These photos are watermarked from an internet blog. And these legal terms you've thrown around, judicial corruption, systemic fraud, bias in adjudication, you have provided zero admissible evidence for any of them. She fixed Karen with the kind of stare that stops time. That's not legal argument. That's slander. The gallery sat frozen. Even the bailiff stopped shifting his weight. Judy straightened her papers into a perfect stack and spoke with surgical finality. Here's what will happen next. Your claims are dismissed with prejudice. You will be referred for perjury review, and this court will impose financial sanctions totaling $500,000, payable to the production and to the state for wasting judicial resources. It was over. The woman who had entered believing she would sue Judge Judy had just been stripped of her credibility, her dignity, and $500,000 before she could even protest. Karen slumped back into her chair, silent now, as the gavel struck once like the final nail in a coffin. For a long moment, the courtroom didn't breathe. It was as though the air itself had frozen in place, holding everyone inside that single echo of the gavel. Then slowly sound returned. A sharp exhale from the gallery, the faint creak of someone shifting in their chair, the rustle of a producer's headset. But not from Karen. She sat completely still, her lips parted in disbelief, her eyes glazed with the stunned incomprehension of someone who had just collided with reality at full speed. Just moments ago, she had stood defiant enough to threaten one of the most formidable judges in America. Now she looked like a crumpled painting of that person, her posture bent, her binder of evidence lying forgotten on the floor like the ashes of her own arrogance. Judge Judy rose from the bench with her trademark composure, as though she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the center of the courtroom. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply gathered her notes, gave the smallest nod to the bailiff, and exited through the side door with the calm grace of someone who had just completed a routine chore, rather than rewritten the ending of someone's life. The show's theme music swelled softly in the background, and that was when it truly hit the audience. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, something they would be telling stories about for years. The day a woman tried to sue Judge Judy, and left owing her $500,000. The producers, meanwhile, were already in motion. In the control room, editors were marking time codes, highlighting the exact moment Judy turned the tide, the instant Karen's defiance dissolved into fear. We're clipping this for socials, one of them whispered almost reverently. This is going to break the internet. And they were right. Within an hour of the episode airing, the footage began spreading across every corner of social media. The moment Judy calmly asked Karen to define judicial bias became an instant meme. The clip of Karen's face as Judy pronounced the $500,000 penalty became a reaction image posted thousands of times. And Judy's line, "That's not legal argument. That's slander," was emblazoned in bold captions across TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. By the end of the night, The hashtag #JudgeJudy500K was trending in over a dozen countries. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as everything from a masterclass in judicial precision to the most expensive tantrum in TV history. Even legal commentators weighed in, praising Judy's measured handling of the situation. One former appellate judge tweeted, "What you saw today was textbook judicial discipline, patience, precision, and devastating timing." Law professors dissected the exchange on live streams, explaining how Judy had patiently let Karen build a case of smoke and then dispersed it with a single gust of real law. They pointed out how Judy hadn't simply ruled against Karen. She had built a record strong enough to withstand any appeal, ensuring Karen's defeat would be final and absolute. Karen, meanwhile, was imploding. As the clip went viral, her name became synonymous with courtroom humiliation. Former colleagues distanced themselves. Brands she had partnered with scrubbed her from their websites. Her employer announced an internal review of conduct, which insiders knew was code for, "We want her gone," without the backlash of firing her outright. By the third day, her personal social media accounts were locked, but not before screenshots of her earlier posts bragging about how she would take down Judy on live TV circulated like vultures picking the last shreds of dignity from her public image. She had gone from would-be crusader to cautionary tale in less than 48 hours. News anchors spoke of her in the past tense, as though she were no longer a public figure but a historical footnote. Friends stopped answering her texts. Even her own family, according to tabloid reports, urged her to issue an apology. But Karen refused. She remained defiant, claiming the ruling was rigged, though no one believed her anymore. The public had seen what actually happened. Not bias, not corruption, but the simplest truth of all. She wasn't prepared, and Judge Judy was. While Karen unraveled, Judy's reputation rose higher than ever. Fans flooded her official pages with messages of admiration. Late-night hosts replayed the viral clip with stunned laughter. "She ended her with grammar," one comedian joked, referring to Judy's calm correction of Karen's misused legal terms. The American Bar Association even issued a statement commending Judy's unflappable adherence to judicial ethics under intense provocation. What Judy had done wasn't just winning a case. It was reclaiming the sanctity of law from the chaos of ego, and people respected it. Inside the network, executives were practically glowing. Ratings for the episode broke all previous records, and reruns surged as viewers tuned in just to witness the destruction again. Judy's contract, already the most lucrative in daytime television, was rumored to be under renegotiation with an even higher bonus clause. What had started as an attempted takedown had become a coronation. Judy didn't just win, she ascended. Karen, on the other hand, received the first formal notice from the court. A certified demand for payment of the $500,000 judgment. It arrived by courier, stark and unceremonious. A single white envelope that might as well have been a gravestone. She reportedly sat on her porch for 2 hours just staring at it, unable to open it. Because opening it meant admitting it was real. Admitting that this wasn't a bad dream or an unfair edit. It was her life now. A life with $500,000 of debt, no allies, and the permanent title of the woman who tried to sue Judge Judy and lost everything. Judge Judy never gloated. She didn't need to. Because this was never about winning an argument. It was about proving that arrogance without evidence collapses on contact with truth. Karen had tried to challenge the system, but she hadn't brought facts. Judy had brought an entire lifetime of them, and in the end, the price of Karen's pride was $500,000 and her reputation. If you believe facts will always outlast fake confidence, subscribe now and hit the bell, because this isn't the last courtroom reckoning you'll witness here.